Friday, November 10th, 2023, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today, we're going to look at the war that ushered in a century of inflation and a century of more wars. Yes, that was the Great War, as it was known at the time, or World War I, as we know today. And of course, tomorrow is Armistice Day, and it's also Remembrance Day here in the UK. So that's what we're going to look at today in the context of inflation, because on this channel, that's the most important topic that we talk about: inflation, money, and how it affects everyone. And it's something that very few understand, and I'm going to try to explain to you why this war ushered in a century of inflation. And before I do, many of you, of course, over the years have asked me, where can I get gold? And I've provided the channel with affiliates. And I just wanted to let you know that Oliver Tempo at Gold Investments has some good deals on various states' sovereigns. He's also got a fairly good deal on Krugerrands, and also Miles Franklin. He's got some good deals on fractional gold and fractional platinum, and also 1 ounce silver kangaroos. So just check out the details below in the description, and maybe give him a call. So back to World War I, or the Great War, whatever you want to call it. So the war to usher in a century of inflation, I'm sure the people who fought in that war, the average person was not looking to usher in a century of inflation for their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. They were told, of course, the usual narrative that they're fighting for king and country, for democracy, and all that. But we're going to look at the money today, of course. And I've taken the saying, the war to end war, or the war to end all wars. And apparently it was a book written in 1914 by H.G. Wells, The War That Will End War. That's what World War I, or the Great War, was supposed to be. And of course it was anything but. So let's quickly go through this inflation situation. Well, prior to this war, all the other major wars, when you were fighting them, governments suspended convertibility. What does that mean? Well, basically they suspended sound money. You couldn't use gold and silver. You had to use paper, currency. And why is that? Well, because governments need gold and silver during wars, because as Alan Greenspan said, during wars and conflagrations like that, paper money across borders is not worth much. So they have to pay for the material that's needed for war with real money, and the people at home have to use paper or tokens. And usually after these wars, prior to World War I, there was quite a bit of inflation during the war, and in the aftermath, prices rose because people were not silly or stupid to think that paper's worth as much as gold, and they could see that governments were borrowing and printing to fight the wars. I mean, World War I was not expected to last long because all these belligerent countries were on a gold standard, on sound money, but they suspended it. So, but what happened during World War I and after World War I is that we never gone back to sound money. And if you go back to the Napoleonic Wars, there's something called the Bank Restriction Act of 1797, and that was like the suspension of the gold standard of convertibility here in England, and it lasted till the end of the war, at least for the UK in 1814, and then things got back to normal. And we had, as you can see here from the Bank of England inflation calculator, from 1814 to 1914, we had minus 0.4 inflation every year on average. So we had what people call deflation. We saw the Bank of England the other day, their chief economist, Hugh Pill, say that they didn't want to raise rates too much because it would endanger their 2% inflation target. But here we have 100 years when Britannia ruled the waves, and you can have whatever opinion you want of the British Empire, but we had this 100 years of industrialization. People became wealthier in, as a whole, and you had negative inflation. And what does the 69 pence mean? Well, it means that the purchasing power of the pound, of the 1814 pound, in 1914, the pound, you only needed 0.69 of a pound to get what you could get with a pound in 1814. So the currency, the purchasing power increased. And why was that? Well, because the Bank Restriction Act was repealed, and the country went back on sound money. My theory, though, is that the Napoleonic Wars was just like a warm-up, an appetizer for the Great War, World War I. And I think the bankers realized that they could do this. They could suspend convertibility and go on a fiat currency system. And for some reason, it didn't continue. So they that's the way I see it. You could think it's a conspiracy theory, but I think the real purpose of World War I was to get everyone off sound money and to have what we have today, and it's succeeded. For over 100 years, we don't have sound money anymore. The United States was able to keep it for a while, till 1933 domestically, and then till 1971. But if you look at it, it's been an age of inflation, at least for the UK. If you look now from 1914 to 2022, we've had 4.2% inflation a year on average. So totally opposite to the 19th century. And I would argue this number used to be larger. And why is that? Well, because I've been looking at this for a few years, this calculator. And last May, the ONS changed the way they calculate CPI all the way back to 1949. And I noticed that this number went a little lower. I think it was a bit closer to 5, which makes a big difference over 108 years. And yes, we've had inflation. We had hyperinflation in Germany in 1923. We also had Russia, the Empire of Russia, and the German Empire. They were destroyed because of this war, and I think the bankers kept their base here in England, and that's why they kept King George V. And it's interesting that I have 3 coins here of the cousins. They were all cousins: Wilhelm, Kaiser Wilhelm, King George V, and Tsar Nicholas. I think with the exception of Wilhelm and Nicholas, who were third cousins, they were all first cousins. And I've got here a 20 Reichsmark gold piece from 1904. Show you here with, there you go, with the Kaiser. And that was before World War I, right? And we have here a 10 gold rubles, 1899, with Nicholas. And we have a sovereign, and this one's from 1915, but it's with George V. So there you go. And what did the fall of the German Empire and the Russian Empire have to do with this? Well, I think it's easier to change society and have them accept, socialism, communism, and all that. If you don't have a monarchy, am I saying I'm a monarchist? No, but I think it disrupted the whole order. So a little bit of history here. So tomorrow, of course, is Armistice Day. I've got this from the New York Times. I know Gerald Celente calls it the toilet paper of record, but be as it may, they've got here the edition of Monday, November 11th, 1918. Armistice signed. End of the war. Berlin seized by revolutionists. New chancellor begs for order. Ousted Kaiser flees to Holland. And it says here, it's quite interesting, Kaiser fought Hindenburg's call for abdication, failed to get army support in keeping throne. Socialist chancellor appeals to all Germans to help him save fatherland from anarchy. War ends at 6 o'clock this morning. The State Department in Washington made the announcement at 2:45 o'clock. Armistice was signed in France at midnight. Terms include withdrawal from Alsace-Lorraine, disarming and demobilization of army and navy, and occupation of strategic naval military points. So there you go. That's what we celebrate here in the UK, remembering this armistice and all the people, unfortunately, that died in that war. What else? So, as I said, prior to World War I, at the end of wars, countries always went back to sound money because it was just an emergency that you use fiat. But unfortunately, ever since the end of World War I, we've never gone back to sound money. Yeah, they try to go back. I think it was Winston Churchill. He was chancellor around 1926. But they went back on the gold standard at the same rate that England, the UK was under the gold standard prior to 1914. And that didn't work because there's so much currency in circulation and not enough gold. So he went in at a wrong rate. Basically, it led to the Americans, the New York Fed, keeping sterling artificially strong by cutting rates. And that led to the roaring 20s and to the stock market bubble and the eventual crash. And then England left the gold standard, or the UK, in 1931, and then the US left it domestically in 1933. And the other thing as well, a fiat currency system enriches the bankers because there's more and more debt. Governments and countries and nations have to take on more and more debt. Is it any wonder we're at 34 trillion almost in the US, almost at 3 trillion pounds in debt in the UK, and there's no stopping it. And the people who are benefiting from it are the people that deal in debt, the bankers. And it also allows nations to not just fight wars, but do all kinds of projects that in the normal, sane, sound money world, they wouldn't do. So, yes, that's my conclusion. Unfortunately, the Great War was a war that ushered in a century plus by now, of inflation and of wars and of crises and misery. So my hope is that, and I know it feels it feels like we're in a deep hole at the moment, but it's usually from a deep hole that you get out of the hole. My hope is that in 100 years' time, someone could be talking about the age of sound money that we've had in the last 100 years. Maybe in 2123, someone will be saying that. And that's all we can hope for. And educate people about these things. So with that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's 8:38 a.m. London time. And we had some economic data in the UK, GDP. GDP was expected to drop by 0.1 in the third quarter, while the ONS tweaked it and it came out at 0. Year on year, it was expected 0.5, it came out 0.6. But we've got stagflation because we've got inflation really running around 10% and we've got no growth. Anyway, spot gold is at 1955, is down $3. High's been 61, low 53. Silver is up a cent, 22.64. High's been 75 and the low 58. I noticed yesterday that gold and silver rallied in the afternoon London time from the lows earlier on in the day, so it was a positive day. But they're still under pressure from the bullion banks, I guess, the inflationists. So Dow futures up 100, NASDAQ is up 12, S&P is up 9. Currencies are pretty much unchanged, so I really won't go through them. And let's look at the bond market. And yesterday, we had a really bad 30-year bond auction. That's when the U.S. Treasury issues new debt to the primary market, to the Treasury dealers and the primary dealers of the New York Fed, and they provide securities to their clients. And in these auctions, they bid for the auction, and there's something called the tail. The tail is the difference between the highest and the lowest bid for the auction. And whenever that tail is very long, that means there's not very big demand. You want a tail that's very short in terms of bid and offer of the yields. So it wasn't a good auction. It's not surprising. And apparently international bidding was not good. So the bond market came back down. We'd seen the bond market rally in the last week or 10 days. And we also had some fairly hawkish comments, I think, from Jay Powell. He said that the Fed would be prepared to raise rates, that inflation's still not 100% under control. And that's why the 10-year rose quite a bit. It went from around 4.5 to like 4.65, I think. Right now, though, we're at 4.61. It's down about 2.5 basis points. And what about the UK bond market? Well, the 2-year yield is right now at 4.68. It's up 6 basis points. And the 30-year is up 10, back up to 4.83. As I said, I think we're in a long-term bear market for bonds. So yeah, there will be corrections when bond prices rise and yields drop, but that will be just a counter trend rally. I think the days of continuously lower yields through the years and decades is over. It's now going to be that way. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day and a very good weekend, and a peaceful Remembrance Day tomorrow as well. Take care. Bye.